Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The husband decided to go to extreme measures after the incident, and those measures were today's story with a subplot. Enjoy watching it. My Lord Almighty, this mission is getting boring. We've been watching these nasty idiots for months now. We listen and see where they go and who they meet. They are smart and careful in their actions and connections, but in the end, we are smarter. We have the resources and technology to catch them, but this country has laws, and we must follow them, otherwise, the terrorist group will be free, and then we will have to pay dearly for it. I need sleep, a hot shower, good food, and a long run to clear my head. I try to call my wife at least every other day. The last call was a little strange. She seemed out of her mind. I don't know how out of it she was, but she wasn't the same as usual. She was distracted on the phone. It was clear that she was not listening to what I was saying. We didn't talk long, but she asked me when I'd be coming home. I realized that this was her main concern. When I got home, something was happening. I needed to be there and find out what it was. My problem at the moment was getting out of London. My bosses at home were not keen on me leaving London and returning home unless it was absolutely necessary. Since I didn't know what awaited me at home, trying to convince them that I needed to go home for a while was a difficult task. Reluctantly, they agreed that I could take the weekend and Monday and Tuesday to go home and see Amanda. Rebecca was very quiet when I explained to her that I was leaving London for a few days to return home. She simply nodded at me, indicating that she understood I had a home life, even if that home life was very limited. I took my bag and caught a taxi to Heathrow. Rebecca saw Michael suffer as he told us that he needed to go home to Washington or New York for a few days. He simply said that he needed to go home to his wife. I assumed that something might have flared up with her. I knew that she had a lover on the side. Her ability to be faithful to her husband disappeared even before she married him. I received reports from our agents in New York that confirmed what I already suspected. Amanda had an intimate relationship with another lawyer at the firm where she worked. From the beginning, I decided to keep my knowledge of Amanda's extramarital affairs to myself. I was almost sure that Michael knew exactly what his wife was doing. If he didn't know it yet, he would soon find out. Eventually, these things usually come to light. I knew from my own marriage that people cannot hide their actions for long. My husband had an affair with one of the nurses he worked with for Doctors Without Borders in Africa, and she ended up pregnant with his child, which led to our divorce. I'm a realist, if nothing else. Life in the military and serving in national security has taught me a lot. The main lesson is to keep your eyes and ears open and observe what is happening around you. I understand people. I understand what motivates them and what drives them to do what they do. I'm not a psychologist, but I grasp human nature. I also understand Michael. He is a very strong person, both physically and mentally, and he comprehends many of the same things I do. He is highly driven when it comes to his beliefs. This doesn't mean he is ready to allow his wife to openly cheat on him, but he knows that Amanda is a very ambitious woman with needs and that she is not going to give up on what she wants. Michael's self-discipline is impressive. He is very reserved, but he sometimes surprises me. The few times I managed to lure him into my bed showed me that he is also extremely passionate. He can be both assertive and loving. I just have to be patient and wait for Amanda to ruin everything, and then I will be there for Michael. I'm very patient. Amanda, I just received a text from Michael. I'm flying to New York tonight on an overnight flight. See you tomorrow. Great! I can't wait for you to come home. Safe flight. Love you. Jake handed me my iPhone when he saw I had a message. We were at the hotel and had just finished our weekly meeting. It's always a pleasure to spend time with him. He understood my needs and always knew how to satisfy my desires. He didn't try to replace Michael. He knew he couldn't and didn't want to. He had his own life and family, and they always came first. Jake was a realist who understood our relationship the same way I did, which made our encounters feel so good. It was just a night. You're probably asking why, now that I know I'm pregnant, I'm still having a night with Jake. Well, I wish I had a good answer to that question, but I don't. It's complicated yet simple at the same time. I am a woman with complex needs and a psychology that drives me to get what I want. I understand power and what motivates people. I need regular intim to feel satisfied. It validates me as a woman. The ability to choose who I sleep with affirms my power over my body and environment. Strange, I know. I wanted to feel Michael next to me every day, but circumstances and life dictated otherwise. It's a pity that this is the case. I wanted my husband in my bed every night, waking up next to him every morning. God, how I wish I could control the urges that drive me to act the way I do, but I cannot. We showered and dressed, and after making sure we were presentable, we left the hotel. We never kissed in public or showed any signs of affection other than what might be considered normal for two people working at the same law firm. I walked out the front door, turned right, and walked 2 blocks to my office while Jake walked in the opposite direction to catch a taxi to meet a client. Life went on. That evening, I heard my phone ring and saw Michael's name. He sent a message, "Taxi on the way to your apartment." I had already prepared wine and food for us. Earlier in the evening, I had bought Chinese takeout, which was waiting to be eaten after his arrival. My plan was to greet my husband with a glass of wine and a meal, then show him the pregnancy test and tell him he was going to be a father. After that, I planned to take him to bed. Michael was able to board a British Airways flight directly from Heathrow to JFK. He took off late in the afternoon, and since he was flying west, he arrived in New York in the evening. I took the train to Grand Central Station. It's a tedious way to get into town, but it's cheap and probably the best option if you don't have a lot of luggage. I had a small bag and an old leather briefcase, so luggage wasn't an issue. I'm used to public transport. It's the only way to get around in big cities, and taking the train didn't bother me. At Grand Central Station, I took a taxi to Amanda's apartment. I still thought of it as her apartment, not ours. When I arrived at the front door, the doorman recognized me and informed me that there was probably Chinese food waiting for me. I grinned and thanked him for the tip. I got out of the elevator and walked down the corridor, not knowing what surprises awaited me. When I rang the doorbell, it opened almost immediately. My wife, to whom I had been married for just over a year, greeted me with a big smile. I walked in, dropped my bags, and took her in my arms, kissing her. "I heard you ordered Chinese food for dinner. Any leftovers?" "I am starving." Amanda laughed. "Looks like Roger ratted me out." "I haven't eaten yet. I waited for you." I closed the door with my foot. The rest of the night went as I expected. The food came after night. 2 hours passed before we got to eat. I poured us some wine while Amanda heated up the food. As we clinked our glasses and took a sip, I noticed that she had barely sipped hers. In fact, the wine barely touched her lips. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Honey, I have news." I looked at her, completely captured by her attention. "What's happening?" "It's not just me, this concerns us." Amanda put down her glass, and now she really had my attention. She took a small white plastic stick, about 10 centimeters long, from her pocket and handed it to me across the table. I looked at this piece of plastic as if it were a grenade ready to explode in my face. "What is this?" For a smart person, you can be pretty stupid sometimes. "This is a pregnancy test." "I am pregnant." Amanda's eyes widened, and her eyebrows raised as she emphasized her words. "Damn it!" My mouth opened, but the words that were in my brain did not come out. 5 seconds passed, and finally, I said, "Damn it." I jumped up, hugged Amanda, and kissed her. "Wow." Then, thinking that I needed confirmation, I asked, "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure. I did 10 tests, and 2 days ago, I went to the doctor." So yes, I'm sure I'm pregnant. The planner in me was running a million miles an hour as thoughts filled my brain. I realized that this was a game changer for us now. I needed to change something in my work. I needed to be at home. I needed to spend more time with my wife. No more weeks away from home. I had new responsibilities, and I needed to put Amanda and the baby first. This was a game changer for me. Amanda telling Michael that I was pregnant was incredibly stressful, and I didn't realize it until I was next to him, handing over the pregnancy test. A million thoughts were running through my head, and chief among them was the question, is Michael the father of my child? I prayed it was him. I looked at the calendar a million times, figured out the date I got pregnant, and thought Michael was most likely the father. But a small part of my brain still worried that it wasn't true. Modern medicine is almost certain about the date of conception, but my doctor said that even with all the science, the exact date of conception remains an estimate. The error can be up to a week or more. The date of conception was based on the date of my last period. I was most fertile about 2 weeks after my last period started. But damn, how could my IUD fail? I was planning on removing it but hadn't done so yet. It doesn't matter now. Now I need to manage the men in my life. I need to control my life and bring my husband home as soon as possible. 6 months later. Michael, Amanda is now 7 months pregnant and growing bigger every day. I can feel the baby kicking and pushing when I'm near her. I lie in bed at night holding her, counting her movements. The baby sleeps when Amanda sleeps and moves when she is awake, or so it seems to me. It's a little absurd, I know, but that's how it seems. I almost stopped traveling for work. I went to the bosses and said I needed to make changes. If they wouldn't let me change my travel schedule, I would be happy to quit my job and they could find a replacement for me. Strangely, they didn't mind too much and agreed that I could shorten my work trips and work remotely from Washington or New York. After much discussion, Amanda and I decided to live in Washington while she was pregnant and that she would also work remotely from home. It took some getting used to, and we both still needed to travel a bit, but we spent 90% of the time together. Living with my wife full-time was different. I mean, being together so closely was a challenge for both of us. I forced us to put down our laptops and phones and go outside for physical activity twice a day. We walked several miles, and it was time to put aside work and think about each other. Our intimate life intensified the more we were together. We were less urgent now. I wanted to make time for Amanda's needs, and it was common for us to spend time without clothes during the day. It's so different being with her full-time. In my defense, I grew up to be a very independent person, and my military training reinforced that sense of independence. I had to rely on myself first. I always knew I had a dedicated team of professionals behind me supporting me, but at the end of the day, the responsibility for getting the job done was mine. My current job was the same. Traveling the world was further proof of this skill I had perfected. Now I needed to learn new skills. Yes, it was a new world for me. Being a full-time husband and father was new territory that I needed to master, otherwise, everything would be chaotic. My role in the world was to bring order to the chaos and make sense of it all. 6 months later. Amanda, oh my God. I'm so tired, and I really need to take a shower. I can actually smell myself. I think the baby has fallen asleep, and Michael is trying to sort out his email. I'm going to jump in the shower, freshen up, and grab a bite to eat. Motherhood is a lot of work. How did my mom and dad deal with it? A child changes everything for us. Emma Victoria is now 4 months old and always hungry. Breastfeeding was a little challenging for me at first. I mean, my own body produces the milk that my baby feeds on. It's strange and illogical. As a New Yorker, I'm used to eating out a lot and thinking that my body is a restaurant for my baby. Well, that's different. I don't think it's that weird now, I just do it. The baby will soon switch to bottle feeding and begin to taste delicious purees from the blender. Purees of carrots and other vegetables must be absolutely delicious. Ah, parenthood. Michael takes to fatherhood like a duck takes to water. He organizes everything so well and divides problems into manageable parts. His ability to go almost without sleep amazes me. I don't know how he does it. He goes for a run every day, leaving around 4:30 a.m. I don't know how far he runs, but when he returns, he takes a shower and quietly climbs into bed with me, hugging me. I almost forgot about my random afternoon activities in New York with Jake. He's a good lover, but he has his own life, and I have mine, so that part of my life is over. The company wants me to return to work soon. The managing partner calls me weekly to check on me, but it is clear that he wants to know when I will return. He wants me to take over another part of the firm, perhaps contracts or criminal defense. I think contracts are better for me now. We agreed that I could work from home several days a week and spend 3 days in the office, so my maternity leave will end soon. It's time to hire a nanny. But where will we live? Michael's life with a baby is starting to settle down, and I've made a deal that I can work from the New York field office for the next few months. Amanda and I bought a large apartment in the city, closer to her office, and arranged for a nanny. She doesn't live with us, but sometimes stays overnight if necessary. She is a private student at the City College of New York, taking a combination of in-person and online courses. She wants to become a paralegal, so she decided that working for Amanda could give her an advantage in getting a permanent job after graduation. I'm still based in Washington, but I'll be working out of the New York field office. My many superiors are keen for me to return to full-time duties and have informed me that my first task will be to return to London and assist the British Security Service. This will not happen for at least a month. We have a lot to do to get settled into our new apartment in New York and make sure Emma and Amanda are okay. I'm used to living out of a bag. I need very little to survive. Perhaps this is a consequence of my army training. Regardless, this means I'm easy to please when it comes to a place to live. Rebecca, I heard that he returned to the country. We've set up a new operation in Manchester after capturing the nasty mans we were tracking at Heathrow Airport. These idiots phoned easily, and we interrogated them daily to understand the rest. After a little persuasion, they began to provide names of others in their network, and now we are working on the next link in the terrorist wheel. This is not a James Bond-style job. It involves a lot of watching and many boring days and nights waiting for someone to make a mistake. It also involves a lot of communication surveillance, so we have a lot of technology to listen in on their conversations. Mobile phones are easily tapped, but they use gaming systems that allow players to talk to each other. This is much more difficult to crack, but we continue and slowly gain nuggets of information that allow us to get closer. Michael didn't know that I was part of the team in Manchester. He was staying in a small hotel, and his cover was that he was doing academic research into local history. With his adorable black horn-rimmed glasses, he fit in perfectly with the look. I knocked on the door of his room. I heard movement from the other side, and after a few seconds, the door opened. "Here he is," Michael said, wearing glasses and holding a book. A smile spread across his face as he took off his glasses. "Please come in." Michael's room was large compared to most hotel rooms. "The agency must be happy you're back at work," I said, "judging by this suite." I laughed as I said this. They said they were pleased with my return to field work. I'll probably end up paying part of the bill out of pocket, but whatever. I can't stay in these tiny boxes you call hotel rooms. Michael suggested a drink, and I agreed. We chatted for a few minutes about his newfound fatherhood, and then, as I expected, he got straight to the point. We spent the next 2 hours discussing our current project, what we planned to do, and how exactly we were going to do it. Infiltrating terrorist networks takes time and, of course, a lot of money. People can be bought with money, especially when they see how those who have money live compared to those who don't. Few terrorists actually care about the cause they serve. Most of them are in it for the money they can send home to feed their loved ones in whatever miserable place they came from. Ideology rarely buys food, medicine, and things. Instead, ideology usually buys pain, suffering, and death. That's the way the world is. This has been the case for millennia and will continue to be so. I could tell Michael had gotten down to business, and his thoughts about his family were now taking a back seat. He is incredibly analytical, and his ability to focus like a laser beam on a problem is what makes him so good at his job. We went to dinner, and of course, since we were in public, our conversation turned to mundane things. I wanted to know how he copes with fatherhood. I knew his daughter's paternity might be in question since his stupid wife was sleeping with another idiot she worked with. She didn't know what she had and couldn't keep her legs together when her husband was gone for more than a few days. I knew Michael knew, or at least I was pretty sure he did, but we were all civilized people, so this was never discussed. This man was so reserved. How he did it was beyond my understanding. I was furious when I found out that my husband slept with a nurse and got her pregnant, but being proper English women, we decided everything cleanly and without emotions overshadowing the plan. We divorced without much fuss, and I continued to look for what I really wanted, and I was successful. I expected a knock on the door. After all, I knew that Rebecca was part of the team for this mission, so I was glad to see her. I put on my glasses and held the book in my hands to pretend that I wasn't expecting her visit so soon. I couldn't pretend for long. I took off my glasses and put them, along with the book, on the table. I smiled when I saw her. I knew what would eventually happen that night, and it did. I was hungry, so we went for a snack and a drink. I used this as an opportunity to tell her some stories about how I changed diapers and handled a newborn. I can fire a pistol while skydiving, but changing a dirty diaper is something the Army didn't train me for. If she could handle me telling her about being a father, she could handle everything else. The thing is, I wasn't the father, Michael was. On the road again for a while, I returned to New York, this time to a larger apartment, with a nanny to help manage Emma. The child grew quickly. I was getting back into shape and had lost almost all of the weight I had gained during pregnancy. My breasts were still a little bigger than before, but that's normal. I know that the first time I saw Jake, he stared at my breasts with eyes that said he wanted to take them in his hands. This thought excited me. Michael did this almost every day. It's surprising that I haven't gotten pregnant again yet, considering how often Michael and I have a night. I quietly told Jake that we couldn't continue with what we had. Unfortunately, this part of my life finished, at least for now. I knew from office gossip that Jake had moved on with a cute red-haired intern who worked in the tort department. He was very good at separating that part of his life from his family. He had been doing this for several years, and his bedpost was covered in notches. Now, I was one of these notches. That's life in a law firm, and everyone played the game and made a ton of money. Welcome to the legal profession in New York. Now, my job is to be a good mother first and foremost, and to be a faithful wife. Will I be able to do this, and how long? When he and I were separated, well, it was a completely different matter. At that time, I was a troublemaker, no, more like an adventurer. During that time, I was using the part of my brain that was the other Amanda, ruler of the universe, Amanda who was in control, Amanda who told me what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and who I wanted to do it with. I made the rules. God, I'm getting myself into this kind of crap, I just know it. 1 year later, Michael and I welcomed another child into our family. A nanny turned out to be indispensable as we combined family and work life. Entertainment sometimes appears, but much less often than I would like. The new baby is a boy, Michael Jr. I know what you're thinking. Now, I have a son. We named him Michael Jr. I have not yet decided whether I will do a DNA test for the child. I know this may be needed in the future, but right now, I don't want to do it. If Michael is happy as a father, then I'm happy as a mother and his wife. No need to rock this boat. I know what you're thinking. I'm a stupid woman who can't keep her legs together when her husband isn't around. You're right, but you don't know me, and no one owns me. Nobody. Michael is my husband and the person I want to be with for the rest of our lives. I have a need, and unfortunately, fate seems to have conspired against me twice. My need for control dictates what I do, when I do it, and who I do it with. The man I had been seeing about twice a month since returning to work after Emma was a new lawyer I liked. After a few preliminary conversations and casual lunches together, I decided I wanted him. He didn't disappoint me. He's not better than Michael, just different. He's not a better lover, just different. He doesn't look better, just different. And so I started something that I might regret, but I did it anyway. Rebecca, what a stupid woman she is. Amanda has a fantastic husband at home and still sleeps with all these horny lawyers she works with, well, at least 2 of them. My sources in New York have been monitoring her extramarital activities, and I can tell you that Michael is not the father of this new child. How stupid can a woman be? Michael is keeping everything under wraps, and I guess his pride and ego dictate that whatever he plans will be a closely guarded secret. I'll find out eventually. I am a very patient person. A couple of years ago, after finding out that Amanda was involved with other men, I decided to wait and knew that I would eventually get what I wanted, Michael. Michael, I've been avoiding the obvious for too long. I know I must act. I weigh my options. If I do nothing, and this is perhaps the easiest option, then I will have to accept that Amanda is not really my wife, not in the sense that she belongs only to me. I will have to admit that she has never been and probably never will be just mine. I will have to share her with those she chooses. If I tell Amanda that I know she's cheating, that means there's a good chance we'll break up. She is stubborn as an old donkey, and the demand that she give up her connections may not please her. At first, she will agree, but after 6 months or a year, her needs will take over again. Her sense of complacency is so great that there is a demand on my part. Well, that would be tantamount to a declaration of war. Marriage shouldn't be a war, it must be love. It should be caring, it must be many things. It shouldn't be vengeful. Regardless of what Amanda wanted to do, I had conditions that I wanted met, otherwise, we would have no hope of staying together, loyalty and monogamy. These are simple questions for me, yes or no. If not, then we will go our separate ways. To give myself space and figure out the situation, I returned to Washington. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. I needed to prepare reports and other plans. I stayed in the apartment and called Amanda every day to see how she and the children were doing. A week later, I got on my motorcycle and rode back to New York. During the trip, I rethought all the arguments I had been considering over the past week and knew what I needed to do and how I should do this. The next day, I said to Amanda, "Let's go out to dinner tonight." Maria agreed to stay and look after the children. "I think we need to spend time together away from the kids, just you and me." Amanda looked at me and said, "Great idea, honey. Let's go to our favorite Italian restaurant that we haven't been to in months." So I made a reservation, and that night we both got cleaned up and went out. I ordered a bottle of Amanda's favorite wine, and we each poured a glass. We were both very quiet, and then, after we ate, it was time for me to get down to business. "Amanda, I have some things I want to discuss, and we need to figure it out. After Emma's birth, you know that the agency is taking DNA samples of all dependents in case they need to confirm their identities. I know it's not pleasant to think about, but if something were to happen to me, or, God forbid, you or the children were targeted, having DNA is often helpful. Now, the DNA is stored in a database and used only when needed. Michael Jr.'s DNA is there too. I swabbed his cheek shortly after he was born." Amanda's complexion paled, and her eyes widened. Her head began to bob, and then her eyes rolled back into her head as she briefly lost consciousness. I grabbed her and supported her so that she wouldn't fall out of the chair and hurt herself. "Amanda, oh!" My vision suddenly disappeared, and the room began to spin. "Is this an earthquake?" Michael held my shoulders and held a glass of water in front of me. "Here, drink some of this water." I took a sip, then a long gulp. My heart was racing, and so was my head. My whole life flashed before my eyes in an instant. What have I done? Oh, now what? It took several minutes before I regained control of my senses, stopped hyperventilating, and realized that I urgently needed to go to the toilet. I stood up and said in a quiet, almost whispering voice, "I'll be right back." I ran to the ladies' room, my legs were like rubber, and I held on to things to keep from falling. I emptied the contents of my stomach into the toilet. After 5 flushes, I sat there for a few minutes, trying to come up with a plan. The truth was an option, but at that moment, any plan felt vague. My infidelity was clearly exposed, and on top of that, Michael had proof of my deception, his daughter. Nothing could be clearer. I decided that perhaps it would be better to be honest and own up to my actions. After what seemed like an hour, I returned to the table, half expecting Michael to be gone. I was surprised to see that he was still there. He is not the type to take injustice lightly, so I knew that whatever retribution he planned would be carefully thought out and consistent with the crime committed. We just sat there without saying a word for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't look him in the eye, but I knew his gaze was fixed on my face, searching for any sign or nuance of my soul that might signal my intention to tell the truth, that I wouldn't try to escape this situation. Why doesn't he explode at me? We're in a restaurant, that's why. The explosion and fireworks will happen later when we get home. His tone was quiet when he finally spoke. "Drink some more water, I think you need it." I took the glass and almost emptied it. That helped, but I couldn't speak. A million thoughts raced through my head, but not a single one was coherent. Michael sat there, looking at my face. After what felt like an eternity, he stood up. "Time to go." I realized he didn't say go home, just go, but we went home. What will he tell me when we get there? Moreover, what will I tell him? I was exposed as a fool who had made a huge mistake. I couldn't get out of it. No, DNA doesn't lie, but I do. Not a word was spoken by either of us on the way home. When we walked in the door, our nanny greeted us and told us that both children were fast asleep and she was about to leave. After she closed the door, I sat on a chair and waited for the axe to fall. Michael went to the kitchen, got himself a beer, and brought me a glass of wine. I looked at him as I took the glass, and then there was more silence. Then he started. Michael, when I confirmed the DNA results, I was, without a doubt, devastated. I wanted to be a father. I knew that one day I would become a father, and this was what I was waiting for. Some may think my approach is crazy and stupid, but I thought I was a realist in the modern world. Foolish, especially to think that my wife would give up her affairs when we decided to start a family. Well, now everything was laid out on the table. I wasn't a father, and my wife got pregnant twice by other men. It was a big blow to my male ego and pride. So I made a plan. I'm very good at planning. I take pride in creating detailed and often complex plans as part of my job. I imagined all sorts of ways to resolve this situation. But in the end, it didn't matter. Amanda had 2 children who needed a mother, so my plan had to take their needs into account. After much thought, I decided on the simplest plan. This would be best for everyone. It would, to some extent, satisfy my need for partial retribution and leave us both with our dignity. So, after offering Amanda a glass of wine and grabbing a beer while sitting in the living room of our apartment, I revealed my plan. Amanda, my heart was racing, pounding in my chest. My ears buzzed with the sound of my heartbeat. The rapid thumping was deafening. I looked at Michael and saw his mouth move, but I didn't hear a word he said. His expression was calm, but when my vision cleared and I could understand what was happening, I still didn't quite grasp it. I took a long sip of wine from my glass. It helped clear my mind. It's no wonder wine is so popular. It brings clarity to many things. Amanda, before we continue, I want to share with you my plan regarding the news that neither of the children are mine. He said this so calmly and confidently that it was difficult for me to determine whether he was angry. Michael is very self-controlled, almost too much. As you can imagine, I was devastated to learn that neither Emma nor Michael Jr. were my children. I think they really are my children, but I didn't create them. No, it was another man's joy. Someone else got the privilege of bringing these children into the world. Michael took a sip of his beer, then continued, when I opened the letter with the DNA results, well, you can imagine my shock. Finding out that both of my children were not mine, but belonged to other men, took some getting used to. I'm not sure I fully understand it even now. I'm a smart person, so I grasp things quickly. He took another sip of beer, less this time. DNA is an amazing thing. It's almost magical how it works. It can distinguish between billions of people with staggering confidence. I'm not a scientist, but this truly amazes me. Another small sip. So I guess what you're wondering right now is what I'm going to do with these DNA results. Good question, one that I can answer by asking you a question. Why? Michael looked at me with laser precision. He was completely serious now. I think he expected me to say something, but my brain was unable to formulate a coherent sentence. I don't know what to tell you, darling, I spoke in a very quiet voice. I was guilty as accused and ready to put my own noose around my neck. But the company always teaches that the best defense is a good offense. When the evidence is against you, attack the victim. Michael took a small sip. Well, could we be honest for a minute? Who are the fathers of your children? His question was so sharp. This is one of the differences between us. He was taught to quickly get to the root of the problem with minimal delay and fuss. I was taught that truth is often flexible and can be molded to fit the needs of a situation. This is a legal way of making up alternative facts if the ones in front of you are too judgmental and dangerous. It doesn't matter, the DNA results say you are the father of our children. Michael tilted his head slightly to the side. He does this when he hears an excuse that he considers nonsense. I knew he probably already knew who the 2 men were that I dated while he was away. Can you tell me that you don't like those 2 children sleeping in their beds? Can you tell me you're not proud to be their father? I had to turn the situation around and put him on the defensive. He took one last sip of his beer and placed the empty glass on the table. You didn't answer my question, and I don't intend to. It does not matter. You are the father of my children, and you are the person with whom they will grow up. You are the person who will teach them all the amazing things that fathers teach their children. So, you are the father, end of story. Michael looked at me, tilting his head to the other side. Okay, I can see that you're not going to be honest with me. Now I have a much better idea of what I need to do with that. He stood up and walked into our home office, closing the door behind him. Crap! What is he doing? I went to the door and tried to open the handle. There was no lock on the door, but he propped it with a chair to prevent it from opening. I knocked. Michael, what are you doing in there? There was no answer. I knocked again. Michael, whatever you're doing can wait. I need to talk to you. The door opened abruptly. Now you want to talk? When I asked you a simple question a few minutes ago, you refused to give a simple answer. Now you're ready to talk? Too late. Michael walked past me and headed into our bedroom. He pulled out his old, worn-out suitcase from the depths of the closet, opened it, and began to put his things in there. I watched, too stunned to do anything. Finally, I came to my senses. What are you doing? Where are you going? Why are you leaving? Michael looked at me. I'm leaving. You decided not to tell me the truth, so until you change your mind and want to talk about this, I'm leaving. I have other things to do and other places where I can do this. It didn't go well at all. Are you going to Washington? He looked at me with determination. What do you care about that? I'm sure you'll have plenty of company if you want it after I'm gone. He continued to put his clothes in his suitcase and then returned to our office to find his laptop and an old battered leather briefcase. Once he was sure he had everything he needed, he grabbed both his suitcase and briefcase and headed for the door. He turned and looked at me. I will have my personal mobile phone, so if you suddenly feel like telling me the truth, don't hesitate to call. If you're not willing to tell me what I want to know, don't waste your time and mine. With that short speech, he turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. So that's it. In a couple of hours, my life collapsed around me. My secrets were revealed, and my husband left. God! I went to the refrigerator, took a large glass of wine, and sat down at the dining table. I took a sip and suddenly realized that I was holding my breath. Oh, what have I done? It was not a question, rather the realization that I had caused big trouble and now I would have to pay for my crimes. My sense of self-satisfaction convinced me that it was normal to have a lover on the side. I mean, there are many others doing the same thing. It's almost expected among my colleagues at the firm, and I've known several friends who have spent their lives cheating on their husbands. Most of them handled it pretty well, I guess. The difference is that they didn't get their lovers pregnant twice. I just realized this little mistake. Crap. Michael. I tried hard to control my anger when I confronted Amanda with the DNA results that showed both Michael Jr. and Emma had been sired by other men. Well, how much more obvious would it have to be to conclude that my wife had been unfaithful? In 3 short years, I might have almost accepted the fact that she had an affair, but allowing lovers to father children was what broke my back. No, there was no way I could stand it. I asked the doorman to call me a taxi, and on the way to the airport, my hands began to shake. I folded my hands in my lap to stop the shaking. This has never happened to me before. I've been in situations where I held a loaded rifle and prepared to actually fight the enemy. I fired this weapon to defeat the enemy, and not once did I think about the moral or ethical issues involved in taking the life of a person who wanted to take my life. My job was not to die for my country but to make the enemy die for theirs. Everything is very simple, but here I am, sitting in a taxi on the way to JFK Airport, and my hands are shaking. Am I losing my nerve? I took a few deep breaths to calm myself and realized that my anger was now coming to the surface. I don't usually feel anger, just determination to complete the task as quickly as possible with minimal collateral damage. That's what I did. I caught a shuttle to Washington and then another taxi to the apartment. When I walked in the door, the message light on the phone was flashing. I went to the refrigerator and realized that it was empty, no food or drink. I poured a glass of ice water and pressed play. Most of the messages were from telephone marketers, but none were from Amanda. I deleted all the messages and turned off my phone. I made a mental note to call the phone company and cancel the service as soon as possible. I decided that I wouldn't need it for the foreseeable future. 3 months later, Michael, Syria, is a very hot place regardless of the time of year. The resilience of the people here is amazing. Their ability to survive in a land of dust and dirt is admirable. Of course, the main source of money now is oil production. Traditional cash crops such as fruits and vegetables are still important, but oil is now the cash cow and a coveted source of wealth. Syria is a country of about 17 million people, strictly controlled by the Assad family and the Ba'ath party. The civil war has torn the country apart, and when you add ISIS, Russia, and Iran, it doesn't bode well for the people. To say the country is in disarray is an understatement. I had been in the Middle East for 2 months, working to provide intelligence support to combined joint task force operations. Several nations have worked together to try to bring peace and some stability to Syria and stop ISIS, easier said than done. Each country wanted limited participation and was not prepared to go the way of Afghanistan. This little mess is still going on with no end in sight. Most Western countries decided to fold up their tents, declare partial victory, and go home. The Taliban are slowly resurfacing and seizing control. I want to stay in the game, do my job, and then move on to another task. I still have my personal cell phone and check it once a day, usually before bed, but there are no calls from Amanda. I assumed that she would have one of the lawyers at her firm prepare the divorce papers and send them to me, but nothing yet. I was willing to be civil and just sign them, send them back so my lawyer and her lawyer could work things out, and I would be done with her. Do not misunderstand me, I love this woman. Hell, I even loved her children, her children. They were innocent in all this, and I planned to create a fund to pay for their university education. This would be a trust fund to pay for school. I talked to my lawyer about it, and he could easily do it and include it in the divorce agreement. She could keep her apartment in New York, and I could keep my apartment in Washington. Since I brought my investment portfolio into the marriage, we would only share income earned during the marriage. This meant that I would keep about 80% of what I invested through my brother's firm. My boss was visiting from Washington, and after we talked for a long time about the mission, he looked at me, and his comment about how I looked like hell surprised me a little. Mike, you need a break from all this crap. Why don't you take a couple of weeks off and recharge your batteries? Heck, spend some of that money you have in the bank, relax, and have fun. Then you and I will talk about your next assignment. I have a couple of challenging problems that I think you'll enjoy. He was a Southerner, and his slow talk and manner of speech reminded me of the cartoon character Foghorn Leghorn. I expected him to say, "I'm talking, boy." He was as straightforward a person as there was in the business, and if he said I needed a break from the action, then I really needed a break. Crap. 3 days later, I was sitting in business class on Emirates Airlines, flying to London. I booked a room in a nice hotel near Buckingham Palace. London is one of my favorite cities, and I have always enjoyed my time there. On the second day, after a tour of the British Parliament, I relaxed in my room with a beer and planned the next few days. I rented a car and was planning to go to Scotland. There was a knock on the door of my room, unusual for this hotel, as there is always a guard at the entrance, and the front desk never gives out room numbers without the guest's permission. Who could it be? My instincts were heightened as I quietly walked to the door to look through the peephole. It was black, so whoever was on the other side covered it with a finger or tape. Crap! I didn't have a gun with me. The British do not encourage carrying weapons without an official reason, and I was officially a tourist. There was a little space to the left of the door, so I stood there, trying to decide what to do. If someone on the other side of the door had a weapon, standing in front of the door was a bad idea. If I opened the door, they could just shoot through it, and it would be game over for me. So I stood aside and waited. There was no sound from the other side, and my heartbeat increased noticeably as I tried to control my breathing to avoid making noise. There was another knock. I looked again to see who it was. I hadn't booked anything from room service, and they always announced themselves. There was only one person who could know where I was. I decided to take a chance and open the door. I switched sides so that I was on the side of the door where it opens when I turn the handle. Was I surprised to see who was standing there? Yes and no. My guest said, "Hi, Michael, nice to see you." It was Rebecca. I found out that Michael Stewart was in London. It had been almost a year since I last saw him. He looked a little gaunt and thin, although his face was tanned. He just stood in the doorway of his hotel room, looking at me with great surprise. I could tell he was processing information in his head, trying to figure out how I knew where he was. This didn't surprise me at all. "Are you going to invite the lady in, or should I just stand here in the hallway and talk to you?" He shook his head and blinked. "Please come in." He stood aside so I could enter, then closed the door and bolted it. His eyes ran up and down my body, from head to feet and then back up again. I could tell he was looking at my left hand to see if there was any new jewelry there since we last saw each other. There wasn't any. We both hesitated a little, then hugged and started kissing. He was like someone possessed. He dragged me into the shower, and after we cleaned up, he said, "I'm terribly hungry, let's go eat." We went to a restaurant recommended by the concierge, and a taxi took us to the door. Michael asked the concierge to call ahead, and the head waiter showed us to a private table. The place was nice, not too fancy, as we weren't dressed very smartly, but the food and wine were very good. After the wine was brought, he began to speak. "I'm not surprised that you knew I was here. It was difficult for me to decide whether to call you or write to you. Many months passed, and a lot of things happened. I didn't know what was happening to you. When I saw you standing in the hallway outside my hotel room door, I immediately understood what I wanted to do. Thank you. Now it's my turn." I was quietly watching him. "I knew that your wife had another child, and if I may speak frankly, I know who the children's parents are. This, of course, is presumptuous on my part, but if you are not completely mad, you should know how I feel about you." Michael smiled when I said that. He nodded slightly. "I think I have a good idea, and I think I have a much better idea of what I want. The last few months have given me the opportunity to think very carefully about this. I've made some decisions." I looked at him and had to ask, "Are you ready to share your solutions?" "Yes, I have to be completely honest with you when I say this." Now I started to wonder what he was thinking. I'm a good judge of people, and my entire professional training has been to read what people are going to do before they do it. Michael was the same. That's what made us both good at our jobs. "I'm ready for what you have to say." And so began our conversation, which lasted all night. Michael was exhausted when he finished, and to be honest, so was I. My pulse sometimes increased, but at other times, what he said simply confirmed what I had already guessed. This stern soldier and warrior was predictable when it came to his own life. His sense of honor and loyalty was one of his guiding principles and determined his actions. "Michael, it's been almost 6 months since I confronted Amanda about her children's DNA. I packed up, left New York, and returned to fieldwork for the agency. While I was on holiday in London, I was pleasantly surprised by Rebecca's visit. It was a visit that defined the rest of my life. I also received a call from my brother. He had news about several things. I asked Charles to take care of some things for me in his free time, although he doesn't have much. But what good are brothers if they can't do you a favor once in a while? I asked him to keep an eye on Amanda and what she was doing. I hadn't heard from her in months, so I assumed she was getting ready to file for divorce. With this in mind, I asked Charles to find ways to protect my investment so that any attempts by Amanda to claim alimony, child support, or other resources could be validly challenged. One more thing, I was looking to sell a condominium in Washington, so I gave Charles power of attorney to sell it and transfer the money to my investment account. Charles was working with my lawyer and wanted to talk. He began, "Hey Mike, I have good news and more news. Where should I start?" Probably not very good news at first. "Okay. Amanda isn't doing anything to start the divorce proceedings, at least as far as I and your lawyer know. I tried to contact her, but I didn't get a single answer. I even went to her apartment and just talked to the nanny. By the way, she is very nice, if you want my opinion on this. The nanny told me that Amanda was not visible in her office, but I heard them playing in the other room, so I think they're fine. I haven't gone to her office yet, but I'll go if you want." "Thanks, but that's not necessary, at least not yet. What else do you have?" "Okay, I sold your condo in Washington. I got a good profit on it. It sold for almost double the price you paid for it, and after fees, I put almost $2 million into your investment account. And now the really good news, your account is now just over $22 million. He paused for effect. I was silent. Finally, my brain caught up with what he was saying. Holy crap! How the hell did this happen? Did you break some insider trading laws or something? My brother was laughing hysterically on the other end of the phone. No, little brother, it's all perfectly legal, and it's all yours. I'm very good at picking winners in the investment business, and I did it. I put it all in a perfectly legal account that is managed by me and taxed at preferential rates by the Irish government. They are interested in people investing in their country, and I did it well. You did it, and now you can reap the benefits. Oh my God, I find this hard to believe. I don't doubt you, but I'm sure you understand my skepticism. How can I access the money? Don't worry. I'll send you a package as soon as you tell me where you are, and you'll see how to access your money. By the way, where are you? London. I've been here for a couple of weeks now. I don't know how long. Look, I love you immensely, and I owe you a huge debt, so be patient with me if I have questions later. Don't worry. I have to go, the children are calling us for a walk, and my dear wife is looking at me askance. After I ended the call, I sat down and thought about how I became rich, well, quite wealthy, I suppose. This kind of money opened up new opportunities for me. Perhaps the agency would have to take a back seat in my future. Right now, I still had a wife who didn't really want to be a wife, and her children were another consideration. I started writing down things that needed to be done in the coming days. 1. Decide what to do with Amanda. 2. Decide what to do with working at the agency. 3. Where do I want to live? 4. What do I want to do? 5. What to do with Rebecca? I had a lot of questions and no real answers. Unfortunately, I was an expert at drawing up plans for an agency, but not so gifted in my personal life. My mind went through 1,000 different thoughts that night, and by morning, I had no answers. Rebecca's husband, the guy I want in my life, has returned to London. Now the challenge is to keep him in my life. I think I have a pretty good idea of how to do this. The next few weeks will be key, time will tell. I have a good idea of what Michael wants, and I'm fully prepared to give it to him. He wanted a wife who would be faithful to him, he wanted a family that belonged to him, he wanted to live without deception and hiding the truth from each other. It was easy for me. Amanda, it's been a few months since Michael left. His last words were to call him when I was ready to tell the truth. God, how hard this is to accept. The truth is that I love him. The truth is that both children are not his. The truth is that I was unfaithful to the man I thought I loved. I did it because I thought I could do it with impunity and he would never know. Even if he found out, he would accept me for who I am, love me no matter what, and accept the children as his own. I was mistaken, stupid. Now how do I fix this? Can I fix this? Every time I pick up the phone to call him, I stop and put it back. My shame and guilt overwhelm me to such an extent that I don't know what to say if he answers. You'd think that as a lawyer, I'd be better at lying, that I would make up a story to convince him to forgive me and come home, to me and the children. You'd think I'd be remorseful, but I'm not. I'm still dating someone. I need a man in bed a couple of times a week now more than ever. God, I'm so spoiled. I know it, but I want Michael back very badly. Losing him was a big mistake. How could I be so stupid? I have to go to him on my knees and beg for a second chance. Or can I? Do I have the strength to be humble? I'm not sure. This is an internal debate that has been going on in my head since he left. This is what stops me from calling him, this is what prevents me from calling his brother to find out where he is and going there. Crap. I have 2 children to think about, but honestly, I haven't let their need for a father push me into action. It's selfish, I know, but they're still little and don't understand the difference. The nanny hinted that she would be leaving in a few months because she graduates from high school and her boyfriend has been offered a job in Maine. They are planning to start a family there. Even the nanny understood her life better than I did. I'm such a loser. I need to sort myself out and take action. I expect the divorce papers to arrive any day now, and then it will be too late. I need to stop sitting on my hands and go find my husband, Michael. My boss called me the other day. One of my 3 cell phones beeped, and I had to remember which one was which. He was very interested to know where I was. When I told him I was still in London, he visibly exhaled and said, "Okay, stay there. You'll be working with the British. They're complaining that we're not sharing information with them in a timely manner. Go figure it out. So your new task is to get close to their people and stay there until I say otherwise. Got it?" "No problem," I replied. "This might work in my favor," he added. "If you have any questions, call me day or night. I just love getting calls at 2 a.m. "Oh yeah, now get to work and send me your daily report the usual way." I hung up. This was an opportunity for me. I agonized over returning home and what to do about Amanda. Since I left, she had never contacted me, not one call, email, or text message. I told her to call when she was ready to tell me the truth, but I assumed she wasn't ready for this. When she will be ready is still unknown. I knew deep down that Amanda and I were done. My love for her was not enough to satisfy her needs. I had known this for a long time, but I hoped that she would change. The DNA test results certainly helped clarify the facts, and with the realization that both of her children were not mine, this was definitely the straw that broke the camel's back. If she was so afraid of the truth, then maybe it was best to just end it and move on. I decided to call my lawyer the next morning and take care of it. Every morning, I wake up and think about Michael. I'm thinking about calling him, but I take the phone and then put it back. I'm so ashamed of what I did. I got pregnant twice by other men and gave birth to their children. I tried to pretend that Michael was their father. He was a good father. He is the bravest man I know. He doesn't take any crap, and all he got from me was crap. How can I look him in the eye? How can I beg him to come home and continue to try to be a father to 2 children who are not his? How can he look at me again and not think that I will be unfaithful? Will he respect and trust me? I don't deserve his respect or trust. I'm so spoiled. I need to go to work. As soon as I stepped out of the office elevator, I was greeted by a woman dressed in a formal pantsuit. There was a serious look on her face. I thought I recognized her as the bailiff we had used in the past. I almost remembered her name when she said, "Are you Amanda Windsor?" I nodded. She said, "I'm sorry, madam, but I need you to say it out loud." "Yes, I'm Amanda Windsor." She handed me a large envelope, which usually contains legal documents. I automatically reached out and took it. She continued, "You have been officially presented with the documents." "Thank you," I replied, and with that, she turned and left. I watched as she walked to the elevator and pulled out her cell phone to send a quick message. I receive legal documents all the time while working on various cases, but this time it felt much more personal. I sat down in a chair in the office reception area, put down my purse and briefcase, and tore open the end of the envelope. It was a declaration of divorce. Oh, Michael is tired of waiting for my call. He's tired of it. I sat for several minutes, staring at the carpet. One of the secretaries saw me and asked if I needed anything. I exhaled deeply and thanked her, then grabbed my things and headed to my office. When I got there, I threw my things on the sofa and noticed a large vase with red roses. There was a card in a sealed envelope. I smelled the beautiful flowers and sat down to open the card. I read the words. "Dear Amanda, I waited months for you to call, but you never did. I understand if you don't want to do this. I think it's time for both of us to move on. I don't know what you did, other than being a mother to 2 small children and working full-time, but I guess that's none of my business. Whatever you do, I hope it makes you happy. If you haven't received it yet, you will soon receive the documents from my lawyer. It's time for us to leave our marriage behind and move on. Our marriage was, on one hand, a mistake for both of us, and on the other, at least for me, something I will look back on with love. I set up a trust fund for Emma and Michael to pay for their university fees when the time comes. Each account has $250,000, which should be enough to cover school and living expenses if they decide to leave for school. My brother is the trustee and will send you the details later. You are smart, and I know that everything you do in the future will be successful. Take care, make the right decisions, and pass on my best wishes to little Emma, Michael, and your family. Michael. That's all. Damn it. How could I be so stupid? The best man I know, who is married to me, tells me it's over, and it's all my fault. The stupidest thing is that I don't even know where he is. The company did not receive anything useful from me that day. I went down to the family law department and asked a colleague to look over the divorce papers. Everything was very civilized, but the package of documents sent by Michael's lawyer emphasized that the children were not Michael's biological descendants. Therefore, questions about child support did not arise. He offered to pay off the mortgage on an apartment in New York, and I would receive a lump sum payment of $500,000 over 5 years. We're done here. He didn't want to meet the children, and why should he? They are not his. They were so small that in time they would forget him. Well, what to do? Is there any point in trying to talk to him? Will he let me see him after all these months when I didn't dare call? Where is he? This damn agency is very secretive about what they do and where they do it. I know that he often comes to London. Maybe he's there. Maybe I can ask his lawyer where he is. Yes, that's the plan. Find out where he is and then maybe go to him. It took several days of correspondence between my lawyer and Michael's lawyer, but eventually, I got an address, and it was in London. I plucked up my courage and bought a ticket to Heathrow. I left my mother to look after the children in my apartment. She didn't know that Michael had left me. She also didn't know that I stupidly got pregnant by other men and not my husband. After landing, I took a taxi to a hotel near Michael's address. It was next to the famous Hyde Park. I checked in, got myself ready, and put on my best outfit that I knew Michael liked. It was a very elegant black dress and 3-inch heels. He always said I looked pretty as hell in this outfit, and I planned to use it as a weapon to get him back. It was early evening when I was ready for the battle to begin, and I took a taxi to the hotel where he was staying. The front desk was initially hesitant to tell me his room number, but after I showed them my ID and they were convinced that I was a relative, they relented and told me the number. Michael was in a room on the top floor. The hotel was not very tall but was luxurious in a typically British understated manner. I figured it was expensive. I got out of the elevator and headed toward the door. I took a deep breath and prepared to see my husband after almost 7 months, 7 months without contact. I pressed the bell. Rebecca. I heard Michael call out, "Someone has come to see you. You might want to see who it is before you open the door. I've been expecting this person for a while now." Michael looked at me with a puzzled expression for a few seconds and then realized who I was talking about. "Open the door, please." I knew that when I opened the door, the woman on the other side would be very surprised to see me. She wasn't necessarily expecting me and didn't know who I was, but it couldn't be otherwise at the moment. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The woman looked at me with a surprised expression. "I'm looking for Michael Stewart." The front desk said this is his number. I stepped aside slightly and said, "Please come in." I pointed her toward the living room. She tried to make sense of it all as she slowly entered. Michael stood there and spoke first. "Hi, Amanda. It's nice to finally see you. I see you were able to find me. What brings you to London?" Amanda looked at Michael and then at me, her surprise at seeing me with her husband clear. She certainly didn't expect to see me here. I wasn't sure what she expected, considering they had been separated for several months and he had instructed his lawyers to file divorce papers. I knew everything about the origins of her children. It was I who collected the envelope that was quietly left for Michael on his desk at the agency in Washington. If Amanda was stupid enough not to want this wonderful man, then I quickly made him mine. Getting pregnant twice by other men she slept with on the side doesn't speak of love and commitment to me or anyone else with a grain of common sense. So, her loss became my gain. Michael continued, "Let me take your coat." He took her coat and hung it in the closet by the door. "Can I offer you a drink?" "Wine, if possible." Michael went to the bar fridge, pulled out a bottle of white wine, opened it, and poured her a glass. He also poured me a Diet Coke and himself an iced water. We sat in the living room, looking at each other wearily and not saying a word. Finally, Michael broke the silence. So, Amanda, you've come a long way to talk to me, so get started. This is your time. Tell me what you want to say. Amanda took a long sip from her glass. Okay, I'm just a little confused. I didn't expect you to have someone with you. I thought we'd talk in private, just the two of us. I looked at Michael. I can leave if you want. He quickly replied, No, I want you to stay. There's nothing we can say to each other that we can't say in front of you. I nodded and looked back at Amanda. She took another sip and began, Michael, I'm very ashamed of the way I acted. I guess even thinking that you might come home is more than I can expect. I don't know what to say except that I was very stupid, and the way I acted was, well, you didn't deserve it. Please forgive me. The look on Michael's face said it all to me. He tried to be civil and end this as quickly and painlessly as possible, but at the same time, he was replaying in his head the violation of trust by his wife. This was something that, on a very personal level, could not be tolerated. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I had experienced the same thing. Michael took a sip of his water and exhaled. Amanda, I don't know what I can tell you except that when I found out that the two children I thought were mine were actually fathered by other men, that for me was something that goes beyond all imagination when it comes to trust, fidelity, honor, and loyalty. I loved you until the second I found out that you deceived me twice. You betrayed two innocent babies for mine, knowing that their fathers were your lovers. This was the biggest lie of all, and it was from you, my wife. So if you have any illusions that we have a future together, forget about them now. We do not have it. I wish you all the best and a safe journey home. Michael stood up, signaling that Amanda should leave. She placed her glass on the table, and I took her coat out of the closet. Michael helped her put it on. As she stood at the door, she looked at the two of us and said quietly, I'm so sorry, Michael. Michael nodded. Me too. She left his life forever. This was all over. 2 years later, somewhere in Scotland, I picked up my daughter Adrian and carried her across the yard to the barn. We have 4 horses and many cats who have chosen to call our barn home. Rebecca followed behind me. We both had rubber boots on, as it was damp and the yard was very wet. We bought an old estate with a big house and about 30 acres of land. We even have our own fishing pond. I'm not a big fisherman, but I've tried it a few times. Rebecca is now about 6 months pregnant with our second child. When my ex-wife found me in London a couple of years ago, we had just learned that Rebecca was pregnant with Adrian. Now we live in the village. I like to think of myself as a country gentleman, but I know I can live anywhere as long as I have my family by my side. My wife and children are my life. My brother called a few days ago. He continues to make good investment choices, which is good news for me as I need money to begin the next phase of home renovations. Well, what's the use of money if you don't enjoy it? If it runs out, I'll go back to work, not sure what I would do, really. My greatest joy is having Rebecca and our daughter close to me. We don't know if we're having a boy or a girl this time, but it doesn't matter as long as the baby is healthy. I work on several projects a year as a contractor for my former employer. With budget cuts in the US government, it is cheaper to hire outsiders to do some tasks and keep in-house employees busy with priority tasks. Rebecca runs our home and keeps me on track. I enjoy every moment. When I go to sleep next to Rebecca, I thank all the gods in heaven for the good fortune I have to be with her. I reluctantly close my eyes because I want to see the sunrise in the morning so I can spend another day with my family. What do you think of our final installment of the story? I thought the husband did the right thing by sending his wife and children for a DNA test because he didn't know for sure whose children they were. What do you think? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.